we have a certain capacity of handling discomfort, and we are creatures of comfort. And that's not just in business and work and family. Like, I'm talking everything. We have a warm shower every day. Look at the food we eat. Look at the beverages we consume. Like, it's really comfortable. And so we build up this, like, what we call comfort creep. So all of a sudden you live in this bubble of comfort. Then when the slightest discomfort comes in, the slightest trigger, we break, we crumble. And that's what I believe is, when we talk about on a scale between weakness and strength, it's not who can lift the most weight. It's who can step into the discomfort of life, who can handle the challenges that are coming up, who can disarm their triggers more than the next person.
You're listening to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we hold conversations with the most holistically successful people we have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their life-changing events, their perspectives, their mindset, and most importantly, their purpose. I'm Harry Goldberg, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. Father of the most incredible daughter in the world, husband of an incredible woman, and director and empowerment coach at Purpose Advisory. Hope you enjoy this episode, and don't forget to subscribe and like below. Now, let's begin. So Ben Salkeld, welcome.
Thanks, man. Honor to be here.
My pleasure. So for the listeners, you started out in sales and consulting and IT and then media. You started your own media company. I think it was for surfing. Directed it for 4.5 years. You built up Beastbox selling nutrition supplements and then actually successfully sold it for your startup 18 months later. And then after all of that, you started business advisory, moved into leadership and performance coaching. You're director of Rising Kings, and I believe that's where you're inspiring middle-aged men to earn back their lives. And on top of that, you're a father, you're a husband, and I definitely get the sense that you're on a man on a mission. So with all of that behind us, how do you define success?
Yeah, man, I've been thinking about this since you invited me on here. Success is quite an interesting word. For me, I think success is a feeling. There's a feeling that comes when you move towards a target or a goal or something that you wish to achieve, and you're able to fulfill it. And I feel that's when success as the term kind of lands for me. And that can be as small as having a successful day with my children to having a successful business, achieving specific targets, goals, and milestones along the way. So that's how I really define success. I think it's one of those ones that's quite taboo, like a lot of people use the term success. What is success? How am I successful? And, we use a lot of comparison around it. However, for myself, I'm always cautious of that and more looking towards, the feeling of being able to make consistent progress in terms of where is it I'm heading.
Okay, so on the one, it sounds like you've got multiple kind of layers of success. Like you got the big picture, achievement, goal, which you want to move towards. And then you continue to narrow those down as you even get as close to the point of, have I had a successful day with kids? Or even, have I had a successful hour with my children? Sounds.
Yeah, man. It's like one of those things too, it's, success is, probably links to an extent towards happiness, fulfillment, joy, all those terms that, a lot of us use and are searching for. I kind of have changed my view on success over the past decade through just working on myself rather than being attached to something, like it needs to look like this and then it's successful and then I'm a success. Because I feel that just really hindered me from being able to live my best life as a father, husband, and leader. And so that's probably why you get this long-winded answer to what is success. It's not just achieve a goal or hit this mark. Kind of have a different view on it over the past decade of work on myself.
And so, I mean, what ultimately led you as we'll dive into your journey from the beginning, but with just that particular component around success, you said you started doing work on yourself and you started to shift it from this, when I get this, then I'm going to be happy. When this happens, then I can finally feel fulfilled or feel successful. And you've got it to this thing of can I just experience success? If I experience success, then I feel successful.
Mm.
And what shifted that for you?
And so, a big shift for me was around 11 years ago. So I'm 43. It was around when I was 32. I'd just been on that chasing what I thought was success back then, which was financial success. And it was really around business. Like I thought and I believed all I needed to do was earn a certain amount of money or create a business that was going to earn a certain amount of money, sell it. And hey, I'm successful. I'm happy. I'm fulfilled. I can live my life out the ways that I think I need to live it out. It came a sort of point in time where, even as you said there before, like there was some financial success through some of the businesses that I'd created, especially with Beastbox and, being able to sell it. However, just completely unfulfilled, just still not feeling happy, connected, joyous. I found myself just very lost in this whole modality in the way that I was living. And so that led me
Mm.
to asking some bigger questions around that age. So, like I said, when I was around 32, and one of the big clinches that occurred was, I was a surfer. I was an everyday surfer back then. All I wanted to do was go on my dream trip to the Mentawais and surf with my friends, and spend time jumping in and out of boats and surfing some of the world's best waves. And when I went on this trip, the whole time, man, all I wanted to do was lie on the boat and sleep. Like I felt really almost unwell, like just this whole detachment kind of thing came up. And that's where it first clicked for me, that it was like, man, you're chasing all these dreams, all these goals, all these things that you think is success, happiness, and fulfillment. Yet every time you move towards it or hit it or get it, nothing changes, nothing shifts. And so that led me down the path to start investigating, well, what's actually wrong here? Like, am I depressed? Is there something that's actually missing? Is there a fundamental flaw in myself that I need to go and address? And so through that, I was introduced to personal development work. And I'm an engineer by trade, aerospace engineer. Anything around personal development up until that point, I'll be honest, like I laughed at it. I just didn't understand. It wasn't logical enough. It wasn't scripted in ones and zeros, and it wasn't in a textbook. So I was like, well, it's not real. And so at 32, when I kind of had this, not epiphany, but kind of hit, I would say, my rock bottom, like I just wasn't a happy person. I started down this line, like trying to understand what is happiness. One thing led to another. And over the past 11 years, man, like I'm just completely transformed my life and who I am and how I see the world and how I show up.
Mm. I love that you shared that as well, because that's most people's challenge with personal development. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah,
Whereas if they have business success or career success, if they get that promotion, or if they manage to hit those particular performance targets or targets just set for themselves, or even if they want to transform their body or they want to hit a particular weight, like they can understand that because they can measure it. It's a hell of a lot harder to measure personal development, right?
absolutely, man. Like it's not black and white. Like it's very different to the logical thinking. And it's, within Rising Kings, we work with men because it is a logical discussion for men. And we're trying to cross that bridge between the logical and the non-logical, like personal development, which is more around feelings. It's around emotions. It's, you know, just, how does one measure fulfillment? How does
Mm.
one measure, like you said before, like success? What does it look like? So Ben, like what's the number, man? Show me. Like, and what does unsuccessful look like? And you start to realize like these things aren't logical and not mapped out in the same way that our logical thinking is. However, there is a state of feeling that comes with it. Like I almost just use, for me, in terms of personal development and growth, it's just, do I think differently, operate differently, and show up differently today than I did 6 months ago? If the answer is yes, hey, I'm doing the work. And that's what it's all about.
Mm.
Continual progress, showing up as my best self over and over and over, so that every 6 months, every year, I'm a completely different version of myself, just through my lens, the way I show up for my children, the way I show up for my chosen one, the way I show up, for the brotherhood, and the way I show up in the world, and also for myself, the way I think and feel about myself.
Man, that's cool. It's such an awesome frame that you've referenced, because almost every mentor that I have, or everyone that I look up to who I consider to be successful, has shared something almost like
Mm.
very, very similar. And it can be at the complete extremes. Like one person who was a monk for 10 years,
Wow.
the entire time in monastery, it wasn't, am I feeling happier, or do I have less stress and less suffering compared to yesterday or compared to a few weeks ago? So not even 2 months ago, it's 2 years ago.
Mm.
How you now compared to how you are 2 years ago.
Yep.
And then someone else who's similar to yourself, but really focused on business, and but also their art and their expression and everything. It's, are they better now compared to who they were 6 months or a year or
Yeah.
2 years ago? And so I love that frame. Why do you think most people struggle with that? I guess the sense of delayed gratification.
Yeah, well, that's a big one, isn't it? Like delayed gratification, because we're all searching for the instantaneous high. We want to be
Mm,
out of pain right now. We want to be excited, passionate, fulfilled, jumping out of bed in every single moment life throws at us. And I
mm,
have no doubt, there's correlations between the way social media promotes this, TV, magazines, all the sorts of things, and so when we don't feel like that, it's like, man, what's wrong with me? Why aren't I jumping out of bed in the morning? Why aren't I super
mm,
excited about the job I have? Why aren't I super pumped to be a father? Why aren't I super excited by my chosen one, etc.? And so we start to doubt ourselves. We start to fall into, I feel like, a bit of a trap, and we start to think, well, man, unless it's this ridiculously high, then man, it's not worth living for. And so we're constantly chasing highs, whether that's through drugs, alcohol, pornography, all these sorts of things, because it brings that instantaneous fulfillment or highness that we get in the moment. However, as you see, it drops off as quickly as it came, and actually digs the hole a little bit deeper. And so this
mm.
type of delayed gratification around fulfillment isn't necessarily like, I'm not jumping around bouncing off walls, levitating in the way I live my life. However, there's a much more steady stream of fulfillment in my day-to-day moments and happiness, etc. Still have my challenges, still have to confront my demons on a day-to-day basis. However, the amount of time uh, in living in my fulfillment, joy, and happiness is definitely increasing over time. Way more than where I was a decade ago, and more than when I was a year ago, and even 6 months ago. Like that's the continual work, that's the continual progress. And I think the challenge is, like you're saying there before, man, it's uncomfortable, it's slow, it's
Mm.
arduous. Like it's not a take this pill and everything's good. It's not, oh, you just need to read this book. Oh, actually, you just need to do this one thing, and then your whole life changes around you and everything's fantastic. It is consistent, continual work over and over and over.
I think you touched on an awesome point there. Uh, One of the main differences I see between people who make consistent and powerful changes in their lives, when you see how they actually read content or how they actually consume content. Obviously, most people in society today, they'll just uh, look at their screen, and they'll allow social media to control what they consume. Either way, they'll watch an hour and a half of Instagram reels or stories, whatever they're called, and then at the end of it, go, wait, where did my time just go? Oh, I guess I enjoyed myself. But you have those, and even people who read books, they'll read books and they'll say, look at how many books I read, look how awesome that is, as opposed to picking up the book, reading it, going, wow, this is really good stuff. And there's this awesome activity or this practical exercise to do at the end of chapter 3. I'm going to grab that bookmark, put it in, put the book down for a moment, and go and practice it and actually try
Mm,
it out for size. And those who do that latter part, like they have, it's not just that they have faith that the activity is going to work. They have faith that they can do it and see if it's going to work for them, right?
absolutely. That's
Mhm.
that's why it's called the work, right?
Yeah.
Reading a book's not the work. Doing the activity in the book is the work. Listening to a podcast isn't the work. It's taking the action off the back of it. It's the same with YouTube clips or, personal development work, going to someone's conference, events, etc. That's not the work. That's taking content on. That's consuming. It's the challenge
Mm.
is, what are you doing with that? I'm a pretty big believer in that. Everyone has the answers to all the problems they have. Like it's all there. It's
Yes.
it's the challenge of digging in, creating the space into the void to actually find the solution that you're looking for, and then staying consistent with the work to move through it. And I think that's where a lot of people get unstuck. It's fun at first. We call it the honeymoon period. Starting a new program or course, awesome. First 2 weeks, amazing. Oh, blows me away. Look at the rapid changes. This is fantastic. What happens week 3, week 4, week 6, week 8, week 12? It's like it starts to wane. People start to disappear. Oh, they're looking for the next course now. This program's not for me. And it's like I don't love using this term, but it's like it's mental masturbation. It's like we're getting caught up in this mental chasing the fake high in terms of books, podcasts, YouTube clips, events, etc. But we're not actually doing the work that's required. And that's the challenge. That's the hard part. That's the unsexy part that no one wants to talk about, but that's the stuff that actually gets the results that we desire.
So, from your experience working with all people, but especially men, why have you seen that people usually stop before they start getting the results?
Discomfort. It's a pretty common conversation inside Rising Kings. Just gets really uncomfortable. When you start challenging yourself on some harder questions that you don't have the answers to right in that moment, you start to avoid them. When you start to change and shift some of the priorities in your life, whether it's how I'm working 13-hour days, and then it's like, hey man, why don't we drop that down to 10 hours, make them more effective and efficient, and spend another 2 hours with your family? In theory, that's what every guy wants. Oh man, I'd love to spend more time with my family. Now when it's like, hey, let's go and spend time with your family, a lot of those guys freak out because it gets really fucking challenging and hard because the kids don't want to do what you tell them to do. Your chosen one doesn't want to do what you want to do. There's a lot of pushback. It's like, oh, well, it's better off being at work because at least at work, I kind of know what I'm doing. No one pushes back against me. And, I know I'm earning money at the end of the day.
I had a guest share that he was intentionally trying to manage how much time he had and flexibility within the business which he runs to be able to allow for problems in the marriage to show up and actually be dealt with. He intentionally wanted to spend more time with his spouse so that you can address the fact that things are worse, which is the complete opposite to how most people perceive it, right? Because they're like, no, I'll just, all my spouse is telling me is that they want more time with me, so I'll just give them more time, and they forget about the quality of it, right?
Yeah, totally. It's discomfort, man. Like we have a certain capacity of handling discomfort, and we are creatures of comfort. And that's not just in business and work and family. Like I'm talking everything. We have a warm shower every day. Look at the food we eat. Look at the beverages we consume. It's comfortable, man. Like it's really comfortable. And so we build up this, like what we call comfort creep. So all of a sudden you live in this bubble of comfort. Then when the slightest discomfort comes in, the slightest trigger, we break, we crumble. And that's what I believe is, when we talk about, on a scale between weakness and strength, it's not who can lift the most weight. It's who can step into the discomfort of life, who can handle the challenges that are coming up, who can disarm their triggers more than the next person. Because there's people who are really, really down on the weakness scale in terms of they're up in their car, they're driving to work and someone cuts them off and they just get irate and lose their shit. And then it turns into like, they want to fight them. They're going to kill them. It's like, you can't even handle the person who cuts you off in traffic. Like imagine the type of conversations that are going on behind closed doors for that guy.
Mm.
Imagine what's the
Imagine that kid
challenges, yeah,
says,
with the
"No,
kids,
I'm not
etc.
going to bed now."
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, man.
imagine that.
Versus the one who, hey man, guy's in a rush, no problem. Off, jump in front, no stress on my back. You know what I mean? It's like then you can start to move through life with more fulfillment, joy, happiness, engagement, passion, because you're not wound up all the time, worried about all these uncovered triggers that you're not willing to deal with.
And so, what are some of the ways that we're diving deep into this quickly? So that's good. What are some of the ways that you've seen people be able to make that shift and start to, like, literally just use that simple example of, instead of getting pissed off at someone who's cutting their lane and want to, either just getting really angry and tense, or literally trying to let it out and shout at them or get into a fight, to getting to that point of just go, okay, cool, you're in a rush, just go
Mm.
for it. You shouldn't have done that, but whatever. Go ahead, mate.
Yeah, the tools we start with inside Rising Kings, meditation, journaling, exercise. You know, just I'll put those three there at first, right? Like journaling, I think a lot of people don't really understand the power of journaling because I think it's dear diary.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great day today. This is what I had for dinner. This guy cut me off in traffic and it pissed me off. And leaves it at that. Whereas journaling would be, you know, man, the guy cut me off in traffic today. It pissed me off. The question comes up, why? Because,
Mm-hmm.
he shouldn't cut me off. Why? Well, who's he to cut me off? Why is that a problem? Well, I was in the lane first. Why is that a problem? And so we're digging in deep to actually understand what are you actually angry about here? And then as you dig into this, you probably figure out, well, no one fucking respects me. Oh, here we go. Now we've got a good
Mm-hmm.
conversation to have with oneself. Why do you think no one respects you or listens to you? So it's nothing to do with the guy cutting you off in traffic. There's this underneath, there's this inner like voice inside this man or woman that actually feels that no one listens to them. And that could go back to, childhood trauma, never being listened to, all those sorts of things. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole now, but it's like that's why journaling is such a powerful tool, because it's like your own free therapy session. I call it the connection between your heart and your head. Your head's saying, this pissed me off. The heart saying, why? It's really digging in.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is just another calming technique. I struggled with meditation for the past 7 years, up until it's like literally only been in the last, 18 months to 3 years where my meditation is really taken solid form. Prior to that, I used to make the excuses. I don't meditate, man. Why would you? I just, it just doesn't work for me. However, I've had to stick with it. That's why it's the work. It's uncomfortable. Now I would go close to choosing a 30-minute meditation over a 30-minute run. If you'd said that to me 2 years ago, 10 years ago, no way. I'd pick a
Mm-hmm.
4-hour run over a 10-minute meditation, because my mind was that busy, was that hard to, connect with. And so meditation has been a massive tool for helping a man, especially in our work, just find clarity and calmness in his day-to-day processes as he goes through the reality of life. And then the third one, exercise. I guess exercise is a great tool, but you can't, like, the thing is with all these three things, plus we add in things like cold showers, daily gesture of love, high accountability in terms of sticking to our word. But the thing is, you can't just lean on one leg, because what I find is that a lot of guys lean in on exercise. That's my go-to, man. When I'm stressed, I go and exercise. What happens when you're injured? You know? So you're injured, you can't train for 4 weeks. What happens? Oh, I'm just a miserable motherfucker. No, excuse my language, man. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on here, but it's like
Go for it.
miserable man walking around, like angry, frustrated, annoyed. Going back to the example before, someone cuts you off and you're swearing and yelling at them. When you're exercising, no problem. Yeah, I don't yell at anyone, mate. When everything's good, life's good. I don't get angry at people cutting off in
Mm-hmm.
traffic. Yeah, but what happens when you're injured? What happens when there's pressure and stress at work? What happens when the kids are sick? What happens when the chosen one's sick? Who's the man who shows up then? And that's the guy who tends, like, that's our truth. And that's the stuff that starts to cause the crumble and the triggers that we talked about there before. So they're just a couple of the tools, man, that have really enhanced my life, and then I've been able to share that with the men who have come through Rising Kings and share it with them as well.
And I love that. I love that at least from everything which I've heard from you, and including what you've just shared now as well, you share what you've had success with, or at least what you've tried or seen that others have at least had success with as a result of you trying it with them.
Absolutely, man. Like,
And
I've tried a lot. Over the past decade and a half, I've tried a lot of things. And the thing is, like, what I've found, certain things have worked and certain things haven't. And so it's not I went to a seminar and they said do these things, and now I'm like, hey man, you got to do these 3 things. It's always on me. Like, I've even found myself over the past decade, when we call it the work, I'll get into a really good state, let's say, 6, 9 months, 12 months, meditating, journaling, cold showers, doing all my work, doing all my setup, making sure it's there. Life feels good. I don't need to do it anymore. I'm good. First week, no problem. Second week, things are starting to be a little bit unhinged. By week 6, man, there's triggered frustration, angry, annoyance, all the things we've talked about here before, right? It's all on the plate. And I'm like, why? Ben, because you're not doing the work, brother. So what I've worked out in my life, I've surrendered to the work to the day I die. That's just how it is. Like, there's no end game here. It's not, I have to meditate for 365 days, then I'm good. It's, Ben, you may meditate until you can't meditate anymore. You will journal until you can't journal anymore. You will exercise until you can't exercise anymore. You will show up for your chosen one until you can't show up anymore. And it's a continual practice over and over. But it's like surrendering to that whole, I just need to get to this point and then it's going to be good. It's like, no, this is it. It's right in front of you right now. And it's here, and you do the work until the day you die. And as soon as I made that epiphany for myself, an aha moment, man, it's just like, I've just surrendered to the work. I might not want to do it, but I'll do it. And then there's days where it just feels really smooth and easy and effortless. And then there's other days where it takes quite a bit of effort to do it, but I'll do it.
And so throughout your journey, you mentioned that this all kind of changed when you were about 32, right?
Yeah.
Did you already have kids at that stage?
Yeah. So we just had our son. Well, we were about to birth our son.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the shift happened just as you were about to have a kid.
Just coming
Do you
into
think
kids.
that do you think subconsciously that was driving a lot of the shift that you started making?
Oh, probably a little bit. Like, it wasn't just a click down the PD path. Like, it was kind of accumulating over time. Prior to that, around business and marriage and all those sorts of things, I could just, wasn't feeling at my best. In my 20s and teens, I felt really, I was a pretty energetic guy. I was really driven, passionate. And then it just kind of hit into the early 30s where things just didn't feel the same. Everything was a bit harder. And I was, like, it was my darling chosen one who pulled me up on it. She's like, "Man, you're 30 years old. You're the most grumpy 30-year-old I know." And I'm like, yeah, I'm just a man. Like, that's that's what happens. That's what happens as a guy. You just become cranky, like, you just become the cranky dad, the cranky man in the world. And, at the time, that's what I honestly believed. I was just like, that's just being a man. What I had to do, though, was challenge myself on it. Is it? Are there other men out there who are over 30 who aren't as cranky as you? I'm like, yeah. Well, what are they doing, dude? What are they doing? How are they operating? And then that's where I started to break my, the way I thought about things, my beliefs, because it's like, it's not true. There are other men who are able to live fulfilled, happy, passionate, and they're over 30. Okay, let's figure out what they're doing. And that kind of drove me down that path. But coming back to pre-kids, like, we had a pretty intense journey to fall pregnant and have children. And one of the big things that really awakened me to fatherhood was, when we were looking down the line of adopting children. And I really struggled with it at the time, because where I was in terms of my modality, I'm thinking, hey man, it's got to be my sperm or it's not my kid. I don't mean to get crass on here,
Mm.
but it was like, that was my line of thinking. And I had to challenge myself on it and really look into it. What is fatherhood? What does it mean to be a father? It has nothing to do with genetics. And that's when I started to have my epiphany. And I remember the day, man, and this sounds pretty cuckoo and crazy, but as we were trying to fall pregnant, I'm out in the surf. I had this epiphany moment that fatherhood has nothing to do with genetics, and it's all about how I mentor and show up for a soul that decides to come into this earth, or come into under my mentorship. Within that period, within a couple of weeks, we fell pregnant with our firstborn, Bodhi.
Mm. It
And
just
that
happens,
completely
right?
changed my life, man.
Where did you learn those other beliefs from? That if it's not your sperm, not your kid. That if you're a guy and you're getting older, you're going to be grumpy. That's just what happens. Where do you learn these things?
I just say through youth, like just stuff I
Hmm.
started to think and believe, things I'd heard on, whether it's through magazines. We didn't have social media back then, which, based on age, we didn't have, I don't even think we had mobile phones. It was just things that you pick
Hmm.
up, I guess, in that circle of influence you're in. I'm from a small town. I was from Grafton, New South Wales. There's not a lot of heightened, awakened discussions like this happening when I was growing up in Grafton. And so it was like, it's very closed, it's very, very small minded, very narrow minded, so to speak, in terms of these things that we were learning and that we grew up with. And I'm not upset by that at all. I think, that's my journey and that's my path. I'm very grateful for the way I was brought up and what I learned along the way. And it's allowed me to be able to share what I've been able to share today. And that's, I think too, it helps me empathize with others who don't see this way I'm living and leading now and still kind of feel back where I was, because I get it. And when you're stuck in that modality and that's all you know and that's all you believe, it can be a pretty challenging place to live in.
And it's powerful to have that empathy for them as well. And I'd imagine that one of the key resistance points that you'd often get is that, okay, great, cool, Ben, you're nice and chilled out now. You've addressed your emotions and you're connected with yourself, and you'd rather meditate than go for a run, and that's all cool. But there's no way you would have had all those amazing successes had you had your mindset that you have today. Is what I'd imagine a lot of people would say. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's it's all good for you, man. It's all good for you. And I was that guy. I was that guy. You'd go along to
Hmm.
some of these seminars and events, especially early in my journey and personal development events. And you got these people on stage and they're like telling you all these things and all those things. Like, you man, it's all good for you. You don't have two kids that are under 3 years of age, and you don't have this, and you don't have. It's all good for you. Like, that was my mentality. So I totally get that. It's
Hmm.
I totally understand that. However, what I challenge them on is like, hey man, you want to go hop in my shoes for the past 10 years? Be my guest, brother. And you tell me where you tap out. And I'm pretty sure it will be within the first 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, okay. And the tap out could mean just get so grumpy that you just decide to do nothing, or the
Man,
tap
like
out could be
tapping out of
just
the
bring yourself
work.
back.
This, I'm
Yeah.
not working on myself anymore. I don't want this. It's too hard.
Mm.
Well, I'm asking myself all the hard questions. I've countless friends, like from networks that we, used to hang with 10 years ago. But they always ask, why do you keep asking yourself those hard questions? Like, that's
Mm.
what makes me. Like, I want to understand, man. I really want to get to know what's going on underneath. Whereas
Hmm.
a lot of guys will be like, man, forget it. Don't worry about it. Too hard. Everything's okay right now. Everything's good enough. And that's what I mean by tapping out, because man, I'm sure you understand as well, man. Like it's continual work.
It is.
It is challenging. It's beautiful. It's like the analogy of raising kids. It's beautiful, but holy shit, man, it's hard.
I've been doing a fair amount of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was reminded of it literally by you just using the term tapping out however many times. And like the guys there and girls who are incredible at the sport and who have by far the greatest level of progress than anyone else have a few things. Firstly, they're completely dedicated to it. Like they're not just going in once or twice or 3 times a week. They're going in 10 times a week.
Yeah.
They're not just doing a comp just for fun. They're doing 6, 7 comps a year, or even traveling out of state in order to do it, because they're completely dedicated to that work. And other people are like, why would you do that? They're dedicated to it. They're not afraid of drilling, because whenever you're drilling something, especially if it's something like a choke, which can just be so uncomfortable, like, great, you get to choke out the other guy, but then they get to choke out you for a whole 3 minutes right after.
Yeah.
And most people are like, yeah, I'm just going to go really light, and can you just go light on me? And they're not getting as much benefit. Like, sure, like all good to be a hobbyist in the sport. I get it. I am one as well. But there's like, there comes a time, or there comes a stage where you recognize, well, the people who are by far getting the greatest results in this particular area are the ones who don't really care that much if they end up going for something risky and they end up getting choked out. Sure, they can tap, but they're tapping so they can try it again, as they can go for it again. Whereas most people don't even take action. Like they don't even try the risky things because they're scared that they're going to get choked or they're going to get guillotined. And then they'll pull away from even trying it, and then they'll never get good at it, and they'll never get any results. And they'll just be like, yeah, cool, it's easy. Like, yeah, it's easy for you to say you've been training however much for however long, and yeah, great. Or it's easy for you. You just got a stronger neck. Like, sure. Well, hey, they've actually conditioned themselves to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I loved hearing what you were saying about just give it a shot and try the work and see what your progress is, but don't not do the work and then complain about not getting the results that you get from doing the work.
Spot on, man. Spot on. Because I think it's easy to, say it's all good for you. But what we're looking at is them in that moment. We're not looking at, well, what work went into getting them to that point. The jiu-jitsu example. Like how many years, how many grapples, how many times did they test that one single move over and over, like thousands of times? It's like, oh, it's all good for you because you know how to do it. It's like, yeah, man, but it took me 10,000 attempts. Are you willing to do 10,000 attempts? And this is, I guess, what I was alluding to before around comfort. It's uncomfortable, man. It's uncomfortable to grow. And so most of us are only seeing, the rewards of the people up in the spotlight when they've got to a certain point, but they're not looking at the whole path line that it took to get there. And that's where I let myself down, so to speak, 10 years ago, because I was that guy. Oh, it's all good for you. I want the quick, get me there in the next 2 weeks, get me there in the next 12 months, get me to $1 million in the next 12 months, help this business go from 0 to $1 million in 12 months. Like, where's there's a plethora of courses. And then you start looking at them and you go and do, like, I'll help you get to $1 million, and you go and sit in these courses. And then they're telling you these things like, well, it's all good for you. You've got $1 million. What about me? And you realize it doesn't take 12 months. Like everything takes time, man. And how much effort and energy are you willing to put in? How committed are you? How consistent are you? I think they're the things that people pull back on. We think we want it. I have the accountability conversation so many times. I want accountability. Okay, you put them into hardcore accountability. I don't want that anymore. It's like, it's like, well, what do you want? I want accountability. It's like, well, that's what it looks like. That's what it feels like.
I remember someone sharing with me how they this mate of mine who's a personal trainer, and he had this client who's like, "Yeah, I really want you to hold me accountable. I want you to be the taskmaster. I want to feel like I'm in the military. I want you to go like I want you to be like David Goggins for me. Like, are you sure you want that?" It's like, yeah, that's what I want. And this guy's like, probably, I think very, this client was very successful in career, a bit overweight, in his late 40s.
Mm.
And it's like, yeah, that's what I want. I got to be a man's man, this kind of thing. And I don't think he came back after the first session. He was like, yeah, no, maybe that's not for me. It was just too much for him
Yeah.
to be able to handle it. It's like, could you actually imagine being held accountable by someone like Goggins?
Oh
Could you
man,
imagine how
wild.
extreme that would be?
He did a book. Well, didn't mention Goggins, but I think it's Living with a Seal. Jesse Itzler did it, and he
I
paid
haven't read
David
it yet.
Goggins to live with him. I think it was it was either 30, 60, or 90 days. I can't remember. And it's well worth a read because it's like legit, and it's like every day there's just Goggins, man. Like he made him sleep. I remember one thing. It was just like he was getting ready. Itzler was getting ready to go to bed. I know I'm sidetracking here, but I think it's kind of this comfort thing. It's like going to bed and um, Goggins goes, "Oh, come in here." Oh yeah. Goes, "You're sleeping there tonight." He goes, "It's a wooden chair." He goes, "Yep, that's where you're sleeping tonight." He said, you promised you would do anything I tell you to do when I tell you to do it." He's like, "Okay." Yeah, so he had to spend like 12 hours in this wooden chair. And he said it was like the most uncomfortable thing. But what he awakened to was just how comfortable and how lucky and how grateful he is you get to sleep in a bed every night.
Mhm,
And this is this challenge with comfort, right? We are surrounded by it, yet we're so ungrateful for it. We take it all for
mhm.
granted. Tomorrow's going to come, next week's going to be here, next year's going to be all for granted. I can walk literally less than 20 meters and fill up a glass with drinkable water. Take it for granted.
Crazy. Yeah.
Go and spend time in a village, where you have to walk 2 kilometers to get to a well to find the water. Now you're going to have a very different appreciation for hydration and drinking. And these are the little things, man, that I think,
Mhm,
when I say we as a society are stuck in. And this is the stuff when we say awakening, it's our role is to open the eyes of men and the brothers that come through Rising Kings experience to see just the plethora of amazing beauty that's in front of them, regardless of where they're at. It's all in front of them. It's not found by more money, more things, more, all these different things that they think is going to build success. It's right in front of them. It's right there, right now. And that's the challenge.
I'm reminded of uh, this example. Um, where you go around the room and ask people, how do you know that like, how do you know and how do you measure that you're going to be successful?
Mm,
And you'll have people say things like, I got to get my BMI to this, or I've got to make X amount of money this particular year, or I've got to, my kids have got to tell me that they love me every day, or whatever it is, right? All that kind of stuff. My chosen spouse needs to express that they care about me by
mm.
doing these particular things. And they need all these things. And the happiest person in the room was the one who just simply said, every day above ground is a great day.
Yeah.
Like if I wake up and I'm above ground, well, what more can I ask
Mm,
for? What more can I expect might be the difference.
yeah.
And that dives straight into expectations versus appreciation, right?
Yeah, man. Because I think, like, I totally get it. Like to clear it up, like, not, I'm not bouncing around every day. Like, just, oh my God, I'm just so grateful I'm alive today. This is beautiful. I love it. Bring on the challenges. Like, that's not reality for me. And I don't proclaim that. However, there are more
Mhm.
moments of that than there were 10 years ago, right? And the more I practice it, the more I see and the more I feel. I still have my challenges and get stressed out and, feel anxious about certain things and, you know, start to worry and fear, and that starts to creep in. And then I have to catch myself and use the tools that we're talking about and staying in the work to keep that at bay, to minimize how long I stay in that modality so that I can feel grateful, I can feel connected, I can feel joyous. The external environment doesn't have to shift for me to feel happy and joyous. I want to feel it now in every single moment. So that's me, like when I was saying at the start, like looking for consistent progress, like that's the journey I'm on. Like I'm just, how do I continually create more of that in my life?
And it sounds like you're not just creating it for now. Like it's not just to be joyous right now, which would be the kind of quick wins. Although that's something which you'd want to do, right? If you can go and do your exercise, get your adrenaline up, feel great, and you got more joyous. Awesome. But there's a difference between doing that for now versus doing that for now and doing it for the long term,
Yeah, you
right?
definitely want the long term, right? Because one thing that's reality, challenges are coming. That's life. It's not, oh, I wish I didn't have this and this challenge. And like the truth is, there's just always going to be challenges. I want to continually build my capacity that I can take on the challenges, the bigger challenges. As the bigger ones come, I can move through them with more calmness, more clarity, more connection, more presence, more fulfillment, and more joy, even more passion. And so I'm continually working on it to build this capacity up so that, as the bigger challenges come, I'm still able to sustain and feel at a level of happiness and fulfillment. And I don't need everything to be all lined up and in perfect order. And then go, oh, that's awesome. And then 10 minutes later, it's all gone again. And so that's why the work to me is so important, because it's not for the good days. Doing the work on good days, it's no problem. It's for the challenges. It's for the headwinds, because I don't know what tomorrow brings, next week, next month, next year. It's a fallacy that we think we know what happens next and that we're in control. Like I realize I am not in control. All I'm in control of out of anything is just how I think. Right. And then from
Mhm.
there, my behaviors and my actions. But that's it. I can't control what you say next, what the guy does down the road next, what my chosen one says that, ask my children to clean their teeth. I can't control what they do next. It's up that they're,
Mhm.
they're their own beautiful human being who can choose to do whatever they want. And then it's, how am I showing up into that moment? And that's what the work is for me, because that's the challenge. It's also the exciting part, because it's so, you know, every day is literally a completely different day than what it was before. Every moment is a magic special moment when you be present and connected to it. I find myself, sometimes I just get so wound up, I'm not even present. I'm just like, oh my God, trying to operate at the highest possible level and trying to get everything done and stressing and freaking out. And then it's like, what just happened, Ben? That whole day just went through. It's now 6 p.m. What happened? It's like, can't even recall it. I was too stuck in my own head. I wasn't even present.
Mhm.
I feel on when those things happen, I missed out on a day of life. And that's why I call it a practice, man. I'm always practicing. I certainly don't have this shit mastered. I'm just in continual practice.
And it sounds like you're practicing it to do it now and to get the benefits now, but also for the future. There's this point which you shared, which I really just want to bring back to the fore. And it's the fact that you're not doing the work uh, just when you have to do the work. You're doing it all the time,
Yeah.
especially when it's easy to do it. But you're not doing it just for the sake of when it's easy. Yeah, cool, it's easy to do the work. That's fine. You can easily get the results. But it's for the other times as well. I'm reminded of this beautiful mindfulness quote from a really sweet book. Actually, I read it with my daughter quite often now. Uh, Big Panda, Tiny Dragon.
Mm.
Lovely. Every page is just beautiful. Um, but in one of them, it was uh, how's this tree surviving this massive storm while all the other ones are falling over? Well, it's because during the good times, when there was plenty of water and sun and everything it needed to be able to grow, it would grow its roots and invest in its roots during during the good times, so that it can withstand the hard
Yeah.
times.
Spot on, man. Like
Um,
it's exactly what it is. It's like building momentum. It's setting yourself up for the storm. The storm is coming. The storms will always come. I think that's where we trick ourselves. We think, everything's good. Everything's good right now. Okay, well, I don't need to do the work. I don't need to make my roots go any deeper because it's all good. And then the storm comes and then it rips out from the roots. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? Why does this keep happening to me? It's like, dude, like this is the point. Because you want to be able to invest, in yourself through the challenging times, through the good times. I call it just building momentum. It's like you just want to keep building this momentum. It's just it doesn't, all this work that we've been discussing here, for me, it's not about getting easier. Like life isn't easier for me, but the effort is less. So it's not easier for me to show up for my two beautiful children who love to challenge me on many, many levels. My chosen one, the business that challenges me on many, many levels. It's not easier, but the effort required to move through it and navigate it is less. I don't need to use as much effort. I'm not so restrictive, angry, frustrated, yelling, screaming, like, oh my God, when's this ever going to stop? Being more accepting of it, more surrendering into it. And then when things happen and I do find myself like getting frustrated, I catch myself and I start laughing because I'm like, man, you're an idiot, Salkeld, to think it was going to happen any other way. Like, who are you, God? Like you knew what was going to happen next. It's like, you're tripping, man. You don't know what's happening next. You don't know how your son's going to respond or your daughter's going to respond or your chosen one or just some fellow human being. And that goes back to your point before, like that whole thing around expectations. We're brought up thinking we expect things to happen a certain way. And when they don't, we're frustrated, annoyed, and pissed off. And what we're finding is that 99% of the stuff you expect to happen doesn't happen. So you're frustrated and
Not at
annoyed.
least not as the way you expect it to happen, right?
And so you're frustrated and annoyed a majority of the time because you don't know the path that's going to get you to where it is you want to go. Like you don't know what that looks like. But if you stay focused on your North Star or your goal or your thing and you work towards it and you navigate it and you surrender to it, because a lot of the time we think it's this straight line, smooth, beautiful path to get you to the golden zone. But then when it takes a turn, we freak out. But it's not until we have hindsight and we look back and we go, thank God that happened. Man, I'm glad that happened. I'm glad that big challenge happened 3 years ago because that just changed my whole trajectory that led me to where I am today. And I'm way better than what I was if I'd stayed on the current trajectory that I wanted at that particular time. And these are the things, when you start to awaken to it, you start to surrender and just let go and move with the flow. That's the goal for me is like, how do I just navigate life with more flow rather than resistance trying to control it? Not easy.
Almost sounds like you're trying to almost. No, it's not. Simple, but not
Simple,
easy.
but not easy.
It sounds like when you gave that metaphor of the golden zone, right? Like the target you're trying to get to, which in the golden zone, you're kind of referring to the way that you feel. And so it's instead of everything that you're doing is to get to that golden zone, it's experiencing everything which you're doing while already feeling the way that you'd feel when you get there, because you can already have it all right now.
Correct.
Right?
And I get it, man. There's listeners who go, you don't know what it's like. I just lost my wife. You don't know what it's like to be broke. I don't have a job. How do you find fulfillment and happiness in these moments? It's like, I'm not dismissing that they are challenging moments. However, that's the work. How do I find the fulfillment in that moment? How do I find the gratitude in those moments? And that's the practice. That's like you said before. It's like the continual work, because when the storm comes, the challenge comes, it's like, are you ready for it? And can you show up into it? Can you lean into it without just completely dissolving of all understanding and, gratefulness of it, and just going into that whole zone, that dark zone of like, this sucks. I hate my life. It's too hard. It's starting the work now, man. It starts now. The practice starts now. Like whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, you're doing something. It's just whether it's helping you or hindering you.
Now, most of the most of the men who would reach out to you for mentorship, I'd imagine, would already be in those dark places, right? Most people, when everything's kind of okay and they're good days, they're unlikely to really want drastic change in their life. They're like, no, everything's cool. Like, don't make me do the hard stuff now. Like, everything's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's probably
How
50,
to
50, 50. Like our work isn't with the guy who's right at the bottom. Like we
Mhm,
recommend a lot of those guys go and seek professional help. Like we're not psychologists and things
mhm,
like that. Our work is really with the guy, like you kind of alluding to before. Hey man, life's pretty good, but I feel unfulfilled. So a lot of our guys who come in, man, they're quite successful. Like they're doing well in business, but their marriage isn't great. Their health isn't great.
mhm,
They're
mm,
struggling to really find the happiness and fulfillment as being fathers. And there's just a piece missing. Like a lot of guys use the term, they've lost their mojo, or they feel bored, or they feel unfulfilled, and they're using things like going to the pub and drinking and porn and drugs, etc., and gaming even, that's their checkout. And they feel and they know that's not me living my best life. And so they can't. That's when we start the conversation where it's like, well, what do you actually want? Why do you want that? What does it look like when you have it? And then who do you need to be in order to get that? Because we need to figure out the identity of the man that he's in search of. And so a lot of the guys are like, man, I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel passionate. I want to feel energized again. I want to feel connected with my chosen one. I want to feel like I'm having fun with my kids. I want to feel like, I've got energy and drive to do the things I want to do. Awesome. That's where our work comes into play, because we're doing a lot of internal work, helping this guy see, like, it's not going to change by buying another car or another house or making another $10 million in your business. It's going to be found through you doing the work on yourself. Now, mind you, we get guys, on who come through who are in a quite a challenging period. Maybe they've just gone through a divorce or going through a divorce, and they're like, I'm really struggling with this. We work with those sorts of guys as well, but it's case by case. But we're not structured in a way that it helps a guy who's just at rock bottom and can't get out of bed, and it's just the really
mhm.
dark. That our conversation with that guy is, man, you need professional help. Like you need to go and speak with someone about it, and unfortunately, we're not geared up for that. But the guy who's like, man, life's okay. Like it's pretty good. It's a 5 or 6 out of 10, but I want it to be a 9. How do I get it to a 9? That's Rising Kings.
Mhm. Cool. And then your role there is pretty much as a facilitator, mentor, a guide in
Yeah,
many
so
senses.
I don't like. We've got a team now. I'm more up the front end. I work with the guys what we call legacy. So there's 3 parts to this. Like guys who come through phase 1, what's called Rising Kings experience, and so we have unit leaders and mentors who run those units. We run these in units of 10 men at any one time to do the work, the internal work. And those guys then are invited, who graduate, to come to what we call Code Black. It's like our rites of passage. And we take these guys through a very physical, mental, and emotional, I'd say about 72 hours, transformative
Mm,
piece where they take all the work they've learnt through Rising Kings experience and we bring it to the forefront. Okay, this is the guy you said you want to be. Now we're going to see, does that guy show up when times are challenging? And then from there, the guys who complete and go through the rites of passage, they're invited to be part of what we call the legacy brotherhood. And that's where we've got, 40, 50 brothers who are all living this modality, living in this line of work. We have units that are up there, unit leaders, and we're holding each other accountable to doing the work on ourselves, ongoing as fathers, husbands, and leaders. So my role really leads up with the legacy guys. I do quite a bit around the phase 2 with the guys who come along to the rites of passage. And then we've got a team of instructors, unit leaders, facilitators who do the Rising Kings experience.
Cool. And so then how do you define mentorship in your role? Because you made that, you shared, you're on the boat, you're lying down, you felt uncomfortable, you're right on the precipice, right on the edge of a massive shift. And a lot of that was around fatherhood. And you realized that you can actually be a father to any soul that comes under your mentorship. So what's mentorship to you? What does that
Leading
mean?
by example would be the simplest way I'd put it.
Mm.
It's practicing what I preach. Because I think a lot of the things is like, I can sit here and say, oh, you should live this way and you should do that. And same with the kids, you've got to do this. Son, I just want you to be happy, like you just be happy. And then he's looking up to you going, why aren't you? You got to be disciplined, son. You got to be disciplined. That's what's going to make life better for you. And he's looking at you going, why aren't you? And so it's a really big, for me, like the really big shift has been living by example. We call it living your legacy. It's like, well, what's the type of person, if you could create the ultimate person who's living his or her life, what does that look like? Well, they're happy, they're fulfilled, they're doing the work, they're accountable, they're a man of their word, etc. Okay, that's your role, Ben. You go be that man. And so that's mentorship to me. I'm out there to inspire, empower, and support men to live their best life. Like, what does that look like? I got to lead it. I got to live it. This is the example. And that's that can be quite confronting for people, because it's like, hey man, like you can't say this thing and then do this thing, this other thing. It's like you are living,
You can,
breathing.
but then you're just not living with integrity.
You're living
right?
and breathing what you preach.
Mm.
And I feel that from a mentor perspective, that's what mentorship is. It's not dictatorship. You should do this, you should do that, you should live this way. It's like, hey, I'll show you the way I feel is the best way to lead or live. And then for the person who's under the mentorship, do you have questions around this? Hey, I can give you, do you want me to give you some coaching around how I see where you're at and where you want to be and where the gap is and some things that you might want to look at or that you could look at? And that's what I feel guidance and mentorship looks like.
I love that, because it means, and I'd have a very similar definition for myself, but the reason why I really enjoyed that journey or that type of definition is because when you start to mentor people and you start to coach people, you start to guide them, and you have the belief that you need to be the example that you want them to be, right? You need to be the example that you're asking them. I'd never ask a client to do something that if I were in their situation, I wouldn't do myself, hand on heart. Like, no way. It's easy to say that. But there have been times where I'm like, look, I just realized what we've been discussing in the last few minutes and what I was encouraging you to do. I don't know if I'd be capable of doing that myself. But how about this? If it holds you accountable, I'm going to hold myself accountable to it too.
Yep.
And it means that it's no longer just like, yeah, cool, I can palm it off and I could convince someone that I'm doing all the right things and that I'm an expert with it. Like, we can all be pretty influential when we want to be. But then you miss out on all the joy.
Yeah.
You miss out on, ultimately, coaching makes you the coachee as much as it does the coach. And mentoring makes you just as much the mentee as it makes you the mentor.
Absolutely.
When you recognize that they just become a mirror for you. And you've mentioned, though, when you started talking about mentorship, that it was also fatherhood. Like you mentioned the two in pretty much the same sentence. And so how do you see the difference, or if there are any differences, between mentoring and fathering?
The big difference, I guess, between mentoring men and fathering children is children don't have the worldly experience that a middle-aged man does. There's still learn. There's a lot of gaps in their wisdom, and so it's really being able to challenge myself and remind myself when I'm around the children that they're not a 30-year-old adult. they're an 8-year-old child. I think there's a balance though. Like I'll still communicate with them at a pretty high level. Like I don't feel the need to sort of drop down to a where we think like kid talk, like more adult level talk, like outside their stretching them into their growth zone, so to speak. But that's probably the biggest difference around mentoring a grown man and mentoring a child. Is also too being the practice of being more patient with children. That's a big practice of mine. How do I find more patience in the moment, reminding myself Bodhi, he's 11 years old. He wants to challenge right now. He wants to see what he can get away with, and that's okay. And I don't want to strip that away from him because I don't want him to just conform when anyone tells him what to do. And same with my daughter. Like you don't want them to just grow up saying yes to however they're being told and treated. You want them to step up for themselves, speak up for themselves. So it's really navigating that space. How do I create enough space that they can grow and challenge, but also to create the right type of boundaries that they don't go too far and beyond, and realize that I'm doing it out of the practice of unconditional love for these children.
Michael Ray, I don't know if you've come across him before. His incredible example of what a dad is and should be. He was on an episode of the podcast, but he's incredible. And he spoke a while ago about rules for dating my daughter. Anyway, the summary of it, or the core of it, is rules for dating my daughter are whatever my daughter makes those rules to be. Whatever rules my daughter chooses. So if you want to date my daughter, well, it's up to her. But I'm raising her to be able to choose that for herself. She doesn't need to worry about whether or not she makes a particular decision. If I disagree with it, I'm going to come over with a shotgun. Like that's not something she has to worry about. She just needs to make her own decisions. And she knows that she can ask me and get guidance from me because she doesn't have her own rules suddenly. She's got to make them herself.
It's interesting with daughters, a big shift for me around having a daughter and a son is what is the type of man, if my daughter chooses to be with a man, like what does that look like? So I need to show up as that type of man so my daughter can go, oh, well, that's what a husband, partner, lover looks like. That's how he will treat me. That's how he will show up in the family. That's how he communicates and talks and connects. And I think a big thing for guys who have daughters, like that's a pretty big, scary proposition to look at is, are you comfortable with your daughter dating a man who thinks, acts, and operates like you do? Because if the answer is no, there's some work to do, man.
Yeah, I have a daughter who's 2.5 years old, and I've got another daughter coming in a couple months.
Awesome, dude.
So I'm very excited for that. And that's a thought that's crossed my mind many times. And it's not just in the way that I treat my daughter, but it's in the way I treat my wife, in the way I treat family, in the way I talk about my business, or the way I talk about other people, the way I act in terms of, do I do what I say that I'm going to do? And most of the time, I'm far more consistent with what I say because I know that she's there ultimately holding me accountable. A friend and mentor of mine, Ben McAvoy, shared that his definition to be the best parent that he could possibly be is by telling his kids to do what I do, not what I say. And when you take that level of responsibility, like you're creating that level of responsibility for yourself to tell your kids to become you.
Well,
whoa, I better change.
You don't even have to tell them. Like the truth is that is what is actually occurring. So when you've got a child who yells and screams, it's like, why are you yelling? Why are you screaming? Like, take a look in the mirror, man.
when you look up from your phone and you go, "Why are you looking at your screen? Stop looking at your screen."
Yeah.
And you look back, "Oh, wait a
It's
second."
all like we call it the mirror. My chosen one. It's like the mirror. Kids are just mirrors, man.
Mhm.
So anything that triggers you, it's like, where'd they learn that? 9 times out of 10, it's the man in the mirror.
I mean, like, that's powerful because you take that to all different levels. You take that to our definition of masculinity. We take that to how we show up in relationships. We look at how we act for or against other people. I mean, okay, that gets to some pretty deep stuff, but it
Mm.
sounds like the answer is the same in almost all of those, right?
In
I mean, what's your definition for masculinity? How do you define it?
I think it's that the guy in the world who, like we said before, he's calm, collected, he's present, working towards unconditional love. But he's also too, he's strong in terms of physical presence, emotional presence. Like there's strength that comes through these things. And I don't think there's a specific track I'd put around masculinity, but I feel it's it's the type of man we're trying to be. It's that guy who's connected, loving, and caring, but at the same time has control over his emotions, has control over the way he displays himself, his behaviors, his habits, his traits, takes full responsibility on how he shows up, is a man of his word, and has, is willing to be, and inspire, empower, and support all those around him and take that level of responsibility on. Like I feel the world would be a very different, and I'd like to say better place if we were operating through that type of lens. And like I said, I don't have it down pat every
Mm,
single day. I'm still in the work. I'm in the work
yeah.
till the day I die. But I feel if we're all consciously moving towards that, it's a very different state of play.
And how do you define that difference between masculinity and femininity, or what it means to be a man versus a woman?
Yeah, it's a challenging one, man. It's a very very interesting topic. I haven't done a lot of work down the feminine path. Like I don't proclaim to know what it feels like to be a woman because it's obviously very different to a man, especially in this day and age. Like I can only imagine it can feel threatening just walking down a street at night. Like I don't know what that feels like, so I don't proclaim. This is what it means to be a woman. Like I really have just focused on what does it mean for a man to live at his highest order and highest purpose. And that's
Mhm.
where all my time, effort, and energy is gone because it's like I'll support like the feminine side 110%. I'm all for I love it. I'm so grateful for the chosen one I have in my life and my daughter and a lot of the we've had women go through a program. I didn't run it, but we had a female run it, Rising Queens, and being able to watch women grow into that and step into their authenticity and stuff. And it's just being able to, for me though, my focus has just really been around men. How do I inspire, empower, and support men to live their best life? Because if that's my duty, I feel that's my purpose to be here is to start that conversation, to drive that growth in men, and then support the female side as much as necessary as we go through this transformation. So I know that's not it's probably not
No, no,
the answer you're looking for in terms of black and white, but that's my I have not put enough time, effort, and energy into understanding what it feels like and looks like to be a female, because I can't attest to that. I really have no idea. I don't know what it's like to carry a child, to birth a child, to live in a society
mm,
where the female stay at home, cook and clean. Like I don't agree with it, but I don't, and I also too I don't know what that actually feels like, and so I've just stayed in my lane in terms of men and masculinity and saying, hey, there's a higher level we can live at here and operate at, and that's where I've really focused.
I used to focus much the same. At what shifted in terms of just trying to have more empathy for what that experience is, to actually be able to feel it, has been having a daughter. And you've got a daughter as well. I can't just ignore it. Like, I can be the best man that I can be, but part of that definition for me is also being the best father I can possibly
Yeah,
be. And that means I've needed to have more empathy than what I can, I still need more empathy than what I can in many ways comprehend of what my daughter's experience is, but also to try and understand the limitations that our society puts on women.
absolutely.
And then help my daughter recognize that she doesn't need to face those limitations, because she can rise above it. But how do you address that, especially as the role of a father to a daughter in this day
Yeah,
and
like
age?
the biggest focus I look at with my daughter is around like self-love for her, accepting of her for who she is. It's not, don't base it on what others think. Don't, it's not about what people think of you. It's like, how do you see that? And also too, like my chosen one and I, for our daughter, it's like, want to raise like the wildness in her. You don't have to conform and bow down to the pressures that people put on you. Like, step up into your true authentic self. If you want to scream and yell, like, I'm all for it. Like, that's where I need to develop my patience and empathy, because there's a higher level of, especially having a son and a daughter, there's a very big difference between the way they handle emotions. One thing I have learned though through my daughter is, like, she loves these. She's 9, and the level of conversations we have is, it's similar to this. Like, she's just all into understanding her emotions and how they make her feel, and what does that mean for her, and how do I channel, like, what does it mean when I'm angry, what does it mean when I'm sad, and how do I manage that, and how do I grow through that. So that's been a really big thing for us as parents, as we're raising a daughter. And then for the son is around honoring and respecting the feminine as well. It's not just, hey, you're a guy and get out there and kick ass. It's a very different conversation under our roof, which is more around, it's respecting the feminine, it's honoring the feminine. So that's kind of been the way that we've approached the difference between masculine and feminine in our household. Good questions, by the way, mate.
I love that. Thank you. Maybe I should make a podcast. So, I mean, when it comes to relationships, because that's probably one of the big things a lot of guys come to you for, or come to Rising Kings for. And at least what I've seen is that almost always the problem in the relationship is when at least one of the partners is saying it's all their fault. It's all your fault. It's not me. It's not my problem. It's your fault. And a lot of people can still get some pretty good results when they start to recognize that they have some level of responsibility for what's happening in the relationship. But a lot of people seem to have a lot of resistance to this idea that they can be entirely responsible, or they can take full responsibility for the state of the relationship, for the relationship that they have with their spouse, but with everyone ultimately. It doesn't matter if it's friends, kids, parents, colleagues, acquaintances, whatever. How do you address that question of, like, who's at fault and who needs to be responsible?
Well, I think it comes down to, like, it's always your own responsibility. Everything is your responsibility, right? So that's what we mean by the work. So it's really addressing, hey, if the marriage isn't working, of course we can blame, but how much work is one done on himself, if we're talking about the husband in the relationship, done on himself to actually look at, well, where's my involvement here? What's my responsibility here? What am I actually bringing to the table? And what am I not bringing to the table? One of the features we have, or one of the things that we do inside Rising Kings Experience, is we do what's called the Queen Scorecard. We have the men actually provide a scorecard to their chosen one, to their wife, and say, score me across these 4 categories and let me know why you scored me that. And man, there's a lot of guys who resist to do that, but it's like this is part of the process, man. And you'll get some pretty scathing reports come back. Now there are some men who actually go, "Oh man, I gave it to her, no problem," and it comes back and it's not what he thinks those numbers are going to be, and he's like, he's like blown away. He's like, I can't, like, I thought I was 5 out of 5 across all these, but it's like 2s and 1s. And then the triggers start to come up. Well, it's this. It's like, whoa, hang on a second. Her truth is her truth. Her truth isn't what you think she should think. Her truth is her truth. That's how she perceives it right now. And so then the responsibility comes back and the onus comes back onto the man. What are you going to do about that?
I like this. And it comes across to the way we connected. I think you made a post about stress versus pressure. And I really enjoyed, I really appreciated that metaphor. Do you want to share it now and then also talk to how that relates to exactly what we were just talking about?
Yeah. So when it comes to stress and pressure, like pressure is a necessity. Like pressure in life creates us to grow, drives us to grow. It's stress though is the emotional attachment to the pressure that we're under. And so we start to, feel stressed out by whatever it is, the responsibilities, etc., that are coming onto our plate in life. And so the distinguishment that I was making there is like, you don't want stress. You don't need stress. You want pressure, and you need pressure, and pressure will always be there. So it's removing the emotional attachment to the things that are happening. Oh, fuck. Why is this always happening to me? This always happens. It's like, no, man. This is part of growing. This is part of life. That's part of your journey. Don't get emotionally caught up in it. Work through it and deal with it and grow through it, because there's another challenge on the horizon. There's more pressure coming. And the more pressure we can handle, the bigger we can grow. And so that's when we go back to the work and think about sort of the earlier conversation we've been having today, is like, this is what the work's really about. It's building your capacity so you can take on more pressure, so you can continually grow and expand without the necessity of having the stress. Stress leads to the anger, the anxiety, the frustration, all those sorts of things, because we have an emotional connection to the pressure, thinking that it's something that we don't deserve, which is not reality. It without kind of blanketing it, but it is what it is. It's there for a reason. And when we can learn to accept that, that's where we can really tap into the power of pressure to grow and evolve.
And I guess some people who hear that might interpret it in what I believe to be slightly the wrong way, which is they'll hear, well, pressure. Okay, well, I've just got to put more pressure on myself. I've got to create pressure. And then they start, instead of detaching from the emotional points which are causing stress, they start to exacerbate them. They start to give them even more intensity and more power. It's like, well, no, I can't go to sleep. I gotta get more hours done. I gotta get more results. I gotta achieve more. This is like my badge of honor. This is how I know that I'm worth something. And so they start putting the pressure on themselves because they think that's the way that they're going to grow. And I personally liken that to like trying to pick yourself up inside a bucket by like lifting up the bucket, right? Because you're just applying more pressure to yourself in a way that's conducive to stress. It's just ultimately stressing yourself out.
Absolutely.
By imagining pressure that's around
you.
you.
Well, I think a big thing is to get clear for that person who's doing it. First, you got to understand, like, well, what am I moving towards, and why am I moving towards it? I think a lot of us don't stop and ask that question. We just go, got to get this, got to get to this, got to get to this. We don't start, well, why? Like, what's it for? What do you actually want to get to that point for? What's that going to do for you? And that's where I think they're hard questions, because you don't necessarily answer that in 3 or 5 minutes. Actually, it's just because of this. It's days and weeks and months continually asking yourself the question. It's like, what's this all for? Why am I doing this? Why do I get up every single day and run this particular pattern?
Yeah. How's this serving me? Is it serving me? Do I need to hold on to
Mm,
it? Would I be better off without it? Is there a way I can change it? How can I appreciate that it's there? How can I appreciate it's been there until this moment? Such a powerful line of thinking.
absolutely,
That's
yeah.
such a powerful method. It sounds like that's something which you do with almost all guys who come to you, right? Like that. That sounds like it's at the
Well,
core
that's
of
where
it.
we start, yeah, because
Mm.
that's at the core of, yeah, transformation. Why? Like, what's it all for, man? Like,
I don't know. Let me just keep procrastinating.
we're
Let me
rushing
turn Netflix
so
on.
fast towards something, but we don't really understand why. Everything's a rush.
Yes.
Everything's a rush. Rush to get out the door, rush to get to work, rush to get these projects done, rush to get to the next. It's like, where's the end? Like, what's it all for? What are we rushing towards? The first to get in the grave? I don't want to. I don't know if I want to be. I don't know if I want to win that game. You know? But it's hard, when you've been. That's the modality to actually come in and say, just pause for a second. I don't have time to pause. Just slow down. Let's figure out why. I don't have time for that. I'm on a good win here. I'm moving really quick. It's like, so they're the challenging conversations.
And when you put it in that frame, you make it sound like most people have a gambler's mindset, but they're not gambling necessarily with money. They're gambling with their
Absolutely,
time. And they're
totally.
gambling with their emotions. I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you.
Welcome, brother.
Cool. This has been an awesome conversation. What I'll do is I'll wrap it up by kind of feeding back to you ultimately what I've heard, or at least the key parts of what I've heard. And then you have the opportunity to correct or add on or adjust anything which you've said and be able to ultimately share your
Mm,
message with the world. Which would be really cool. And so when I was asking you about what success is, you're really talking about how there's this feeling that you get when you're moving towards a target or goal, and that you can fulfill it. And it doesn't have to be this goal which you're working toward, like this big end goal or what you get outside of you. It's about the target of fulfillment which you're able to feel. And so, have you had a successful day with the kids? Have you met successful milestones within the business? Are you moving towards your purpose? And so, you had this period of time where you had all of this financial and business success, but you just weren't finding the joy for it, and life wasn't feeling connected or happy and joyous. And you had a family coming along or starting, and you were really trying to focus on what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to have an incredible life? And how do I measure my success? It's not logical. It's not black and white. And what you end up landing on is how do I compare myself now compared to how I was 6 months ago? As opposed to this continuous comfort creep and just wanting quick wins to feel a little bit more comfortable. And you spoke about how, especially Rising Kings, use meditation and journaling and cold showers, accountability, exercise. You mentioned gestures of love, which is beautiful as well. And when speaking about your journey, you define fatherhood as almost synonymous with mentorship. When you clarified that a little bit later, you're talking about uh, like ultimately the only difference that you see is that kids don't necessarily have the worldly experience that most of the people that you'd mentor have. And so it's just meeting every mentee at the level that they're at, just being able to continue to support people to be even better versions for themselves. It's like if someone's struggling, it's like, yeah, I see where you're at. If someone's way ahead of you and they're going and you're going, I don't know if I can get this. Like, cool, all good. Like it's all good for you, man. Try and hop in my shoes. See if you're going to tap out. And you spoke about how you're not necessarily trying to build something that ends or something that finishes, which you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, like alluded back towards again. It's like, what do you want to race for?
mm.
Like, what are you even trying to do every day? And for you, I think you said, what do I actually want? And how do I build momentum to continue to move there? So it's not about getting momentum. It's about building momentum. It's not about getting a result. It's about moving towards the result. I love this. You practice what you preach. You do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel like you're able to do it at all. And I think that when you're talking about masculinity or what it means to be a man in today's world, it's like taking full responsibility of our emotions, full responsibility of what happens in our life. How do we inspire? How do we empower others? How do we uh, express love in the world as unconditional as possible? How do we remain present and calm and collected? And how do we ultimately just be the person that we're trying to be? And once again, comes back to personal responsibility. Almost everything which you're sharing is just coming back to personal responsibility, especially when you're talking about stress versus pressure, which is how we connect in the first place. It's back to how do I take responsibility for how much pressure I'm able to take on? Because the more pressure I can withstand, then the more I'm able to grow. And the more I'm able to grow means the more pressure I'm able to withstand. It's not about creating the pressure for myself. It's about detaching from the emotional reaction to the pressure which is outside of us. And what was a really cool point which you finished on there was what am I moving towards, or where am I moving? Why am I moving towards it? And when you approach life from that lens, then that's where your personal development journey starts and probably ends as well. Like that is personal development in itself, right? So what else would you want to add to that?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, like with all of that. That's been the path. I guess to put it in context, I never set out to start Rising Kings. Like it's Rising Kings is what we call a movement. It's not a program or all those sorts of things. Yes, there are elements of it, but it's really at the end of the day, it's this movement of men who want to operate at this level. We call it living your legacy. It's everything you just mentioned there. It's like, how does one live to his highest order? How does, I guess at the core of it, it's how do you leave the world in a better state when you leave than when you showed up? And I think deep down at some level, I think that's the duty of a human being, right? Like we've been gifted this consciousness to go, well, don't we all want to leave the world in a better state and place and awareness and growth than when we first showed up? And I think that's us doing the work in terms of how we were brought up and how we say, oh, I don't want to be my father, I don't want to be my mother, but it's like we want to evolve, continually evolve and grow, and that's really at the heart of Rising Kings. Like it's this movement. It started just me working on myself, and some friends saw the shift in me. Man, Ben's less triggered. He's less frustrated. But also too, it was the conversations. You catch up with mates, and I'm not complaining and moaning. Oh, the wife won't do this, and like I shut that conversation down. I'm like, I'm not partaking in those conversations anymore. That's not it's not how I operate. And so they were curious. Well, what are you doing, man? And so one thing led to another, and I took 5 or 6 mates. I took them actually out to the Blue Mountains and just ran this ad hoc 2 days. I shared them everything I was doing, everything I felt I'd learnt at that point in time, and they started to have shifts in their life through this type of work. And then that was 5 years ago, and here we are today. We have Rising Kings. We've put a name on it, and it's still the methodology and the process that we had 5 years ago. It's just evolved, and this is what Rising Kings is. It's like we call it living a legacy for those men who want to live a legacy. Not leave a legacy, live it. Like live it now. Live at your highest order for your kids, for your chosen one, for your community, for society. And I feel the more men who hear this message and come in and we have a conversation. Look, it's not for every single man. Like it's high accountability. It's challenging. It's confronting. There are deep, hard questions we have to confront and go into. However, for the guy who's feeling like, hey man, life's pretty good, but I'd love to really, I don't want to leave this world with regret. That's the conversation we'll start with. That's the process. That's what we're doing here at Rising King. So, man, thank you for having me on here today and being able to dive in and share my life and my truth and my authenticity. You know, I'm a very open book. I think everything I've shared on here today that's my truth. I'm sure my chosen one might listen to parts of it and cringe and being like, I can't believe you, I can't believe you said that. But I shared with her. I'm like, Carly, I am who I am. The person you meet here today, Harry, on this is the same guy you'll meet in the street. It's the same guy you'll meet at the gym. There's no, he's a different guy in business. He's a different guy at the gym. He's a different guy behind closed doors. It's the same guy, man. Just, I'm this guy out there working on myself. I'm here to inspire, empower, and support me as well as others on this journey, man. So thank you for letting me jump on here today and for your questions and digging in and letting me share what we've shared.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. I love hearing your perspective and your journeys. And it's not just you're talking in a way of how you hope that you'll be or the changes you want to see in the world. You're actually attempting to be that change. And as you said, you don't get it perfect. No one will. But being honest about that is a pretty powerful place to start. Right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
your time. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Success with Purpose, and I also hope that you feel capable to apply some of the perspectives and learnings from this episode in your own life. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to like and subscribe below. And until next time, live with purpose.